How to play Yugioh the Gathering. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a trading card game. Oh, okay, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is not a card game, and instead a manga about a group of friends doing questionable games, or also sometimes tabletop games, including one, most similar to D&D, turned so popular it became the entire identity of Yu-Gi-Oh! And therefore you definitely do not gather, and instead of creatures, use the most ferocious monsters known to man, anime girls, with rules so easy thanks to no resource system and no keywords, we're only having 3 card types, 8 card types, with only 20 card types that you can simply pick up and play. But before you play, you need to get cards. And how do you get cards? Money. Lots of money. And now that you have emptied your parents' bank account, you hopefully got these cards. Sometimes they may look like this, rarely like this. But if they look like this, you got fake cards. And if they look like this, you are in the wrong region. Now that you have all of these cards, you still don't know what to do with them. So we first have to go to your
friendly local game store,
where equally confused and recently bankrupt people are. No, not these. No, also not these. And definitely not these. I'm talking about these. And how do I know that I'm right? Well, let's just say I do. Now that you have found ferocious foes for fighting, you can now beat them in the art of the cards, by comboing for so long that they lose interest in watching you and surrender. Alternatively, you could reduce their life points to 0, but who does that these days anyways? But wait, before you do that, you still need to make a deck with your cards. A deck can have 40, or 60, or sometimes 20 cards, but not 35 or 61, with an extra deck of 15, or 7. What goes in the extra deck? Just everything purple, white, black or blue. Hold up, not this blue, only the other blue, and also no more than 3 of a kind, or 2, or 1, or sometimes you can't even play them at all. With there only being one way to playing the game, or 3, or sometimes even 10, but never more, all you need are 8 rules. The game is separated in 6 phases: draw, standby, main 1, battle, main 2 and end. You start with 5 cards in hand and discard down to 6 at the end phase. You win the game when your opponent's life points reach 0, or they have to draw from an empty deck. You can summon monster cards once a turn to any of these zones, except when you can't. Or when you can do but you don't have to. Or when you can't except when the times you are allowed to. Spell cards can be activated as often as you want, but only in your main phase, except when you can activate them at any time. But you can for certain have to place them here to do that, unless you don't have to. But now you are allowed to play them even if the field zone is already occupied. Finally, trap cards have to be set before they can be activated, except when you don't, in which case you still have to place them here anyways. But what even is here? For that, let's go over to the field. No, not that field, this field. In Yu-Gi-Oh! Both players have a field of 1 space for your deck, 1 for your grave, 1 to place you removed from the game cards, or banished zone if you aren't from the age of pre-PSCT. Add 1 space for your extra deck, and those were all zones considered not in play. While the 6 spell and trap zones, or 8, or sometimes 4, and 6 monster zones, or 7, or 5, or sometimes 3, this game went through a lot, okay, are considered as in play, and can have only 1 card on them at a time. You may now feel like you have mastered the game, but what you still don't know is what actually happens while playing the game. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a turn-based game, so you have to take turns. How many turns? 1 turn, because God has left us. And you follow this flowchart to play that turn. Draw phase, the turn player draws 1 card from the deck. Standby phase, main 1, where you can summon monsters, activate spell cards or set cards. Battle phase, where you can attack with monsters or directly, if there are no monsters on your opponent's side of the field, and includes the dreaded damage step. Main 2, the sequel to Main 1, no one expected, but we all need it, except those who don't get this. And end phase, where you prepare to change turns. Finally, the crux of Yu-Gi-Oh! The cards. But first, you will need to call your doctor, because we will perform some card anatomy now. The first procedure in our operation will be to learn all of Japanese, so that we can decipher what these symbols indicate. Or you simply use the colors, like everyone else. We have 6 attribute of monster cards. You do not count. Trap cards, and, the kanji for devil. As far as I know, the isolated kanji ma just means devil. It can be used for words like maho, to follow its true origin as magic cards, before Wizards of the Coast got angry for using their property. Right next to the attribute is a name of the card, unless it has a name that isn't its name, or it has a name that doesn't exist. But how confusing that may be, Yu-Gi-Oh! At least always uses the easiest to remember names, like Lackluster Soldier, Dash, Envoy of the Evening Twilight, or M of Vector Pain, the imaginary Drake Overlord, and depending on if it's a monster it will have a level from 1 to 12, or spell traps will have 1 of 7 types, with no symbol or 1 of 6 symbols. And this area is reserved for the image of the card, but it can also sometimes be cut down to only this area, while all of the effect text, types, potential subtypes of the card are written here, except that one time Konami was in the edgy phase. Attack and defense are used for battle. This is a set number, because we were too poor for set symbols. The passcode can unlock you cards in games like Yu-Gi-Oh! The Duelist of the Rose. Wait, that uses its own passcode system? Well, at least you can use it in Yu-Gi-Oh! Ultimate Masters World Championship Tournament 2006. And this last spot is where the artist name should have been if Konami wasn't a spell card, signalized by the Mars symbol and this turquoise color, have the main gimmick of only being activatable in the main phase. No type symbol means that you can activate them once by placing them in the spell and trap zone, and after a resolution sends them to the grave. These, totally not normal spell cards, ritual spell cards, are used for satanic summonings by sacrificing the lives of others to summon ritual monsters. But do not panic, after that they too go to the grave. Then we have 3 flavors of continuous spell cards, who all have the feature that they will not be sent to the graveyard after activation. We have the basic continuous spell cards, who will do something on activation, and sometimes can also be activated again while face up. We have field spell cards that are placed in the field zone, that are identical to continuous spell cards, but with fundamental differences, as they can be activated even when you already have a field spell card in your field zone by sending the other one to the graveyard. And we have equip spell cards. They have to be equipped to a monster. Your field, your opponent's field, the grave, doesn't matter, as long as they're equipped to something. And if that something goes away, so do they. And finally, we have quick break cards, who are simply trap cards, that are also spell cards at the same time. Trap cards are like spell cards, but slower and faster at the same time, as they have to be set before activation, but can be activated at spell speed 2. Spell speed 2, you say? But what even is spell speed? Yu-Gi-Oh! Would be quite a boring game if all you could do is play on your own turn. Therefore, that isn't the case. All cards and effects in Yu-Gi-Oh! Have a spell speed from 1 to 3, and only cards of equal or higher spell speed can be chained. Spell speed 1 can be exclusively activated during the owner's turn, during the main phase, when nothing else is happening. Most spell cards and a lot of monster effects are spell speed 1. Spell speed 2 is where almost everything else falls in. You don't like that your opponent activates that monster effect? Use a trap card to stop it. Your opponent doesn't want his monster to be stopped? He uses a quick effect monster effect to stop that. Don't want your trap card to be stopped? Use a quick play spell card to stop your opponent's other monster. You don't know which player's turn it is anymore because so many cards are activated from both players? Me neither. But more importantly than that is if you now want to respond to that original card, you can no longer do so. As in Yu-Gi-Oh! We have chains. Rigid and unchangeable. Once you add a link to a chain, you can only interact with that one directly. Or how it is called, chain blocking. And don't forget, we make rigid chains, so you can only resolve them all at once. And the only cards of the Supreme Spell Speed 3 are counter trap cards, who are only respondable by other counter trap cards. Now, where trap cards are always spell speed 2, diverse, they are not. Normal and continuous trap cards are like the spell equivalent, but with trap restrictions. And counter trap cards are defined through their spell speed 3, but act otherwise like normal trap cards. By the way, destroying a card is not equivalent of negating it. Finally, we have come to the only cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! That really matter, monster cards. I said monster cards, now that is a true monster if I ever saw one. What is this? What does this mean? What is this supposed to do? In Yu-Gi-Oh!, monster is a magical word for whatever you want it to be. Want it to be a monster? Sure, we have 8 flavors of that. Want it to be a trap? Sure, why not? Want it to be a spell card? Here you go. Also, this having no effect and this being without an effect are totally different, and I wish I were joking. People often say Yu-Gi-Oh! Doesn't have a resource system, but that is wrong. The one and only resource Yugioh has is that you only get one normal summon on your turn. To normal summon, you have to look at the level of your monster. Up to level 4, it is free. For level 5 and 6, you need to tribute one monster from a field. And with 7 upwards, you need a second tribute. Except ritual monsters. They can only be summoned with ritual spells. Alternatively, you can slap down your monster as first in a 90-degree angle and call it setting. But you still need to tribute, and you can flip summon your set monsters to face up attack position. But keep in mind, while flip summon doesn't account to your one normal summon per turn, not everyone is a flash. Monsters can only change position the turn after they were summoned. Now, ritual monsters are like that one cousin you have, that is debilitated in some way and you don't really know all that well, so you can't approach them properly. Unlike everything else in your main deck, ritual monsters cannot be summoned on their own. They need ritual spells, sacrificing monsters from a field or hand whose level equal or exceeds the ritual's level. But unnecessary sacrifices are not tolerated by Satan. Last in the main deck, this. Pendulum monsters need no introduction, as you will never come across them ever again after the disaster that was Pepe. If you still want to know, pendulum monsters are like DLC to existing monster types, adding a box and either functioning as their monster type or as a spell card activated in the pendulum zones with their other text box. While inside the pendulum zone, pendulum monsters act exactly like continuous spell cards, except for when they are destroyed, then they count as monster cards, triggering potential monster destruction effects. And then, if you have 2, you are allowed to once per turn summon as many non-ritual monsters from your hand as you want to main monster zones, or face up extra deck monsters to the extra monster zones between these 2 numbers. How to get card face up in the extra deck? Well, pendulum monsters do not go to the grave and destroyed, but the extra deck face up, where they can be summoned to extra monster zones. But that extra deck thing, what even is that? The one thing that definitely differentiates Yu-Gi-Oh! From its competitors is a pile of 15 of the most broken cards you can find that you can access at any times, and we have 4 of these monsters to choose from. The first and only one introduced with the inception of the game are fusion monsters, that need you to activate spell cards to send any monster you want from your deck to the graveyard to summon over-designed monsters that just do everything. Oh wait, I'm just talking about every fusion made in the last 8 years, and not the ones from the first 6 years of the game, where you need to draw exactly polymerization, 2 or more overly specific monsters listed in the summoning requirements, activate poorly, and summoning something that is worse than the sum of its parts. After that, they tried to fix it by removing the spell card with contact fusion, and then they gave up on that as well and said screw it and made every fusion spell broken, but that's still better than rituals, who got broken support and didn't do anything anyways. After that, we got synchro monsters, who are white fusion monsters without the spell, or specific materials. You know what? Synchro monsters are nothing like fusion monsters. To summon synchro monsters you need to send to the graveyard a tuner, and a non-tuner, monster who follow the summoning requirements whose level add up exactly to the level of the synchro monster. The third and best summoning mechanic, the XYZ, or exceed, as no one seems to know how to say this word actually, where stars go the other way and are called ranks instead. They need you to play a pairing game of same levels, most of the time, a lot of the time. Okay, you know what? Just read this line of text that tells you for all the extra deck monsters what they need. If it says level or rank 4, you need 4s. If it says XYZ, you need XYZ. If it says tuner, you need tuner. And if something here is written in quotation marks, you need something with exactly that name. However, if after the quotation mark says monster, it needs anything that has in any way, shape or form that combination of letters in its name. It doesn't matter if it's in the middle of a word, but a space does make a difference. Now, back to XYZ. XYZ do something strange to the monster used for the summoning. They just cease to exist, but not in the sense of going to the graveyard. They simply don't anymore, and become XYZ materials. You don't have a type, attack, defense, level, or name, and they are even considered to be nowhere. But when you detach them for XYZ monsters effects, they do go to the graveyard and are typeless by doing so, not like that will often matter. Lastly, Link monsters, the weirdest of them all, not only because they have strange card frames, and their defense is now called Link, with surprisingly not inflated numbers, but also because all of the extra rulings they brought with them that ruined pendulums permanently, with something that I ignored this entire time. Extra monster zones, where only cards from the extra deck can be summoned to, and had to, that is until we got the not new Master Rule 420, but just rules revision of Master Rule 4 on the 20th of July, freeing all but 2 extra deck mechanics. As that revision did not change how links work, I still have to explain Master Rule 4, with links, unlike pendulums, still being relevant. Links have to be summoned to an extra monster zone when summoned from the extra deck, and contrary to what you know up to this point, that doesn't mean exactly those 2 zones, but instead those 2 zones, or any zones these funny arrows around the frame border point at, if they are lit up. Which, of course, does not mean that you can summon to your opponent's field, but instead that your opponent can summon through the power of existing. Now, there are some funny extra words for linked monsters, as in linked and co-linked, where linked monsters are those connected by non-link arrow, regardless if they have the arrow or if they are pointed at, and co-linked monsters is if when 2 linked monsters have their arrows pointed at each other. And if you build a co-link chain from your extra monster zone to the other, you get an extra link, where you can summon to both extra monster zones, which ruined Yu-Gi-Oh! So hard when everything had to be summoned to extra monster zone that the game was literally decided by people rolling dice and the loser instantly surrendering to save both players the time and hazard of actually playing the game. Do not extra link. But what even is a Cybers, and how is it made of Mizu? And what is an attack and defense anyways? The type of a monster is referred to by other cards using the same word, while the attribute being also referred to in other cards, but written by someone who forgot to turn off caps locks. So even if in the future they invent a new attribute, like strawberry cake, it will always be in caps. But outside of that quirk of the attribute, they are functionally identical used to card names, just that card names have quotation marks added to differentiate them. And for attack and defense, let's move over to the battle phase, in which you punch your opponent into submission to win the game by making your opponent involuntarily stall for time and get DQ'd, or alternatively, if you don't want to get dragged away by the police over a children's card game, you could use the hidden effect, where every monster can for completely free destroy another one by attacking over it, while boring, old-fashioned, and becoming more and more meaningless with the power creep ramping up. You have to win the game via reducing your opponent's life rounds from 8,000 to 0. Win the game cards will never work. First turn kills should never work. And if you play this, you have no one to play against. So battle it is. Now while 8,000 sounds like a lot, don't get tricked. This is just Konami's weird way of saying 4, as this is the amount of attacks you will survive. Anyways, during the battle phase you can attack with monsters only while in attack position, and only once per turn. To perform an aforementioned attack, you have to first choose one of your attack position monsters. Then you can plan an attack towards one of your opponent's monsters and compare who has the bigger number. Wait, why do we compare attack with attack stat? Wouldn't it make much more sense to use the attack stat for attacking and the defense stat for defending? You're right, that would make sense. Now that you have inserted your dominance by proving that your number is bigger, the opponent takes damage equal to the surplus, and their monster gets destroyed. Or alternatively, if they are perfectly matched, as all things should be, both get destroyed. But wait, then what is this defense stat for? You see that monster over there? Oh no, it has 3000 attack, and my monster has only 2500. How should I ever beat it? But wait, that Baron de Fleur was in this weird defense position, so we don't use its attack stat, and instead its defense stat. And wait a minute, that is only 2400, so GG, easy, get wrecked, take 100 damage, nerd. Why isn't he taking 100 damage? Well, because that Baron de Fleur was in defense position, its controller takes no damage. But what if your opponent has now one of these weird face-down defense position monsters? You don't know how much defense it has, and your opponent, he surely will not tell you. And oh no, it has 2800 defense, which is more than 2500. That means you take 300 damage, and your Madolche pudding says Choco a la mode gets destroyed. Not this time. Just say no, and your monster will not be destroyed when attacking a defense position monster with higher defense. Haha, that means when I attack that Blackluster Soldier Envoy of the Evening Twilight that was left in defense position, only he gets destroyed. Well, this is the other case, where the monster doesn't get destroyed, after an awkward staring contest. But if that Blackluster Soldier doesn't die, that means he can change to attack position next turn, and attack over your Madolche Pudding says Choco a la mode. And oh no, you're only at 500 life points, Quick, go to main phase 2 and change your head to defense position so that you don't take damage. Oh no, because she attacked, she can't change her battle position this turn. And if you ever think after this, wow, this was so confusing, I wish there were a rules book for all of this. Me too. This 24-year-old game has still not achieved to create a comprehensive rulebook, and all rules are done anecdotally by whoever is judging the event. And after all of that, you probably think, oh boy, I sure love Yugioh. Just wait until you hear about missing the timing.